From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Waffle flannel.
If you got a tip for Melissa, a place you remember seeing something, the name of someone you never thought to mention until now, the one barber left who still does a Mo Howard cut. Anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, unafraid of serial killers, night stalkers, and condescending public information officers wherever they lurk, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Yeah, PIOs are lurking. They're lurkers.
They lurk. They get ready to. They lurk and they prepare to annoy you.
Mm-hmm. And they succeed like quite often.
I don't think there's any single entity on the planet that makes Melissa more insane than condescending PIOs.
Yeah. I'm sure there are some great ones.
You can't think of any just offhand.
Not immediately.
They don't immediately come to mind.
I'm sure there are. I know there are.
Yeah.
I don't know any, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them have been like less than terrible to me.
Yeah.
But that's not really saying a lot, is it?
I hope I didn't trigger you. You sound like
I'm triggered.
Oh God, okay.
Triggered. I'll tell you what triggers me is but it was in such a cute, fun way. Not really. Is our new YouTube subscriber Chris, and so he is is part of the intro of Waffle Flannel. So Tipster Chris said he subscribed to the channel, which I was grateful, and then he wrote a review and said that that when he first heard the podcast, he really liked it, and then he got tired of 18 minutes of waffle/flannel. So now waffle flannel, I looked it up. It's actually, there isn't anything like that, but there's waffle, like a waffle weave, as far as like Henley shirts, which I love a waffle weave shirt, but not made of flannel. So I think waffling and flanneling, I don't know what flanneling is. Maybe it's a descriptive word I'm not familiar with, but waffling, I believe what Chris is trying to say is I talk too much. So,
Chris.
Right.
Goodbye.
We understand. No, don't tell him goodbye. We're grateful that he subscribed and understand if he decides to reverse that decision because of all the waffling. So I'm going to spend about 18 minutes waffling.
Yeah, please. In fact,
I like syrup.
Baby, you be the waffle, I'll be the flannel.
Oh, you are totally. That's perfect. I'm the waffle. You're the flannel. I'm very. I have crevices and all sorts of things that waffles do.
Oh.
And you're all you're all soft and fuzzy like flannel. So we're the waffle flannels.
There we go.
I like it a lot. So yeah, we do want to thank Tipster Chris, even though he is horrified by the amount that I talk.
All right. Well, I'll welcome you back, Chris, but.
I don't know.
In fact, I think if you keep listening, you'll get used to the waffle flannel.
That's the thing. What Chris said was, if someone listened to this podcast for the first time, they would be turned off by the waffle flannel, the first 18 minutes of waffle flannel. And I was like, maybe some people enjoy eating waffles while wrapped in flannel.
Who doesn't? I mean, who doesn't?
Right.
Come on.
It's it's chilly. It's cold. Not really here in Southern California, but it's very cold other places. And I like being described like a waffle flannel. And so just so you know, Chris, you're not the first person to tell me that.
Now I want to move to Minnesota and make waffles.
Too much. Yeah, and get syrup out of trees.
Oh yeah. Well, that's in New England.
Whatever. I don't know.
Okay.
I just host this. I don't have to know everything. That's your job. By the way, I was going to fire you during this episode to make Chris happy, but I decided not to because you've been so supportive. So.
What?
If I don't have anyone to talk to, Chris can't complain.
Well, yeah.
I wouldn't fire you. I was just kidding.
I didn't know you were going to.
No, it was a joke. It was a jokey joke. Stop crying.
Okay.
Stop crying. So we want to thank Chris, sort of. But anyone who wants to take the time to rate, review, subscribe, to this podcast, we would be delighted if you could check us out on wherever you stream your pods. But if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts, we'd be very grateful. If you have a story idea, a case idea you want us to cover, which is happening more and more, and it's a beautiful thing to get these pieces of information on cases that are not always so well known, that need a little extra push maybe, which is, what we're here for. We're delighted. Please feel free to email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can even call us on the Tipster hotline at 832-847-7837. And we, again, are very grateful for the tipsters who tell us about cases we may not have ever even heard of that are so interesting and fascinating and need some coverage. And we're grateful to be here and happy to do that. So please feel free to call us, email us, rate, review, subscribe, all those things. We'd be, even more grateful to our tipsters than we already are. So this is an interesting case, and I was going to hold off on what I'm talking about at the beginning and use that as part of a murder teaser coming up. However, it just relates completely to the case. So the actual case we're going to be covering is from 2007, and it is a real interesting case. And it's Louise Paciarello, 78-year-old woman who lived alone in a housing development for seniors in Yonkers, New York. Now, the story I'm starting with isn't exactly related, but you'll see how they go together. It was such an interesting piece of information that popped up online a week or so ago. And I was like, how have I not heard more about this? But apparently in January 25th of this year, 2021, the New York City police arrested a man who they are now calling a serial killer. And he has at least 3 women that he has killed. And he lived in a housing development for senior citizens in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. And he had lived there for quite a long time. And he was sort of known around the building as a handyman. And he would fix things for, some of the older single people who lived alone and maybe didn't have skills on how to fix things. He would even run errands, go to the grocery store for some of the women. But then if things didn't go the way he wanted them to, they ended up dead. And all of the victims, he says, he had an interaction with them where they owed him money. Now, I don't know how much money one would have to owe you for you to take their lives. And what is so interesting is he took their lives in different ways. I'm trying to figure him out, and I can't. His name is Kevin Gavin. He's a 66-year-old who lived in this Carter Woodson houses in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. And his victims are, like in their 70s and 80s. And they're, these beautiful older women who it really bothers me that the police are like, these people, these wonderful detectives did their jobs and got this man. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, hold the phone.
Wait a minute. You had 3 opportunities when women in the building keep dying. And the second one, you find his DNA on her clothing. And I get it. He could say, and if he had any sort of a defense attorney worth their salt, hey, Kevin ran errands for, It just, I feel like this,
yeah.
I know. I just feel like this third victim, it just shouldn't have happened. And none of the victims should have happened, but it's a little bit crushing. So
I would love to know how they came to owe him money.
Well, he did odd jobs for them. And maybe, so one of the neighbors, her name is Esther Williams, not like the famous actress who was a swimming person, but she told WCBS TV, he was always looking for money, and all of the tenants knew him. Everyone knows that, Kevin's looking for some side jobs. So that's, how much can you charge? How much can you owe someone?
Yeah.
So it looks like, and he actually confessed. So, but his confession is even as strange. We'll get into this. So it looks like in November of 2015, 82-year-old Myrtle McKinney was found dead in her apartment. She had 3 broken ribs and a stab wound to the neck. Now, she's found on the floor, and here's something that's a little bit crushing. I don't know if they didn't do an autopsy or if a medical examiner did an autopsy and decided, she died of congestive heart failure. And she's being prepared at the funeral home, and the funeral director says, there's a stab wound on her neck.
Wait, the people who found her body didn't see the stab wound in her neck?
Right.
Wow, that's some great police work.
A funeral director. And it's not their job to identify wounds for the most part, unless they're also, a coroner. It's like, she died of a heart attack and just died on her kitchen floor. Well, maybe as she landed, she fell, she broke the 3 ribs. Maybe you could say that. Did she land on a knife?
She landed on a knife.
He said he pushed her into a table and she landed on a knife.
Uh-huh.
Right. Jacolia James was 83, and she was found beaten to death in her apartment in May of 2019. That's victim 2. Now, beaten to death. She's the one that the DNA was found on her clothing. His DNA was found on her clothing, like touch DNA or whatever. And, but Kevin did errands for her. Now, her family was like, she was beaten to death. You have a man's DNA. And the thing that really bothers me is that no one can even prove that he was questioned in her murder in 2019, even though they found his DNA. And I guess
he wasn't questioned.
Well, there's no record of him being questioned as far as I know.
Okay.
So he's getting, I guess he's getting more sloppy. The first victim, it's like, well, she fell, she had a heart attack and fell and broke some ribs and cut her neck on the way down. The second victim, he beat her and he confesses, and then they know that it's even worse than they could have thought. But so this 78, the third victim, the most recent victim of January 15th of 2021, was Juanita Caballero. She went by Jenny, and she lived on the 6th floor of the Carter Woodson houses. And she was found with a phone cord wrapped around her neck. So
it's pretty hard to consider that an accident.
Uh-huh. Yeah, she didn't fall on the phone cord and choke herself. So they finally arrest him, and he is like, oh, yeah, you know what? You're right. It happened. And they say, hey, how about, Jacolia James? Well, you know what? I did stomp on her neck 3 times.
Oh, my God.
I beat her and stomped on her neck. Okay. And what about your first victim? Well, I pushed her into the kitchen table and she fell onto a knife, which punctured her.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry. That's just...
Right. So he's saying Myrtle McKinney, he pushed her because she owed him money and she landed on a knife. He's saying Jacolia James, he beat her up and stepped on her neck. And she's a very small, petite, thin woman, very beautiful, beautiful woman, stepped on her neck because she owed him money. And then Jenny Caballero Juanita Caballero. He choked her with a phone cord because she owed him money. So call him a handyman, Kevin Gavin, who lives in this, housing complex for senior citizens. But he's got a history of being an asshole. They call it like a low-level history. He had some drug charges and some burglary charges. Pretty low level, meaning nonviolent. However, I think we understand who he is, and this is something that producer Mark will be able to probably comment on. He was part of a trio of people in a car that tried to enact insurance fraud. So...
Oh. Okay, so it's all about money for him.
It's all about money, and it's the case is it's against Nationwide, and Nationwide is countersuing. It's pretty fascinating. So in 2018, he was in a car with two other people, and a woman was backing out of her Brooklyn driveway in her Lexus. And she saw this 2002 Mercedes-Benz sharply turn to the right and then try and veer over to her car. And she put it in drive and pulled back into her driveway, but they struck the back of her car. Somehow they didn't hit any other vehicles parked on either side of her driveway. It was like they were sort of aiming for her. Yeah. So Kevin Gavin gets out of the car and goes, "What happened?" My favorite part is that the driver of the car's name is Pedro Joint.
Okay.
So Pedro Joint says, "Get back in the car. Get back in the car." So they're all back in the car, and there's a female passenger named Sierra Simmons. And they were all on their way to a party.
Yeah, sure they were.
They were on their way to a party, and he was going to be the DJ. Now, that's the part that makes me laugh. A 66-year-old DJ makes me laugh.
Right.
Really hard. So... when they do a deposition, of course, when you're in an accident, they, take your statement. Nationwide asks him, well, who was driving? I don't remember the name. Okay. Do you have a telephone number? No, I don't have a telephone number. I met him at a club through a mutual friend. Well, what's your friend's name? I don't remember.
Okay.
Right. So they all lied. It was completely staged. Pedro Joint and Sierra Simmons refused to give Nationwide any statements or be interviewed about anything. And, because New York is a no-fault insurance state, you can get $50,000 a person for a basic loss. And the lawyer for Nationwide, Alan Hollander, said Nationwide was on the hook for $150,000 for nothing, for absolutely nothing. So they filed a suit against those three, saying they engaged in fraudulent conduct, which I'll be honest, I know happens. I'm sure producer Mark can verify that, but I've never heard of anyone being that brazen.
Oh, that's pretty brazen. And I wonder if they came... What state did this happen in?
New York.
Happened in the state of New York. Mm-hmm. And and they're all three of them from New York?
Yes.
Interesting. Because if it's a no-fault state, unless we live in California, so it's not a no-fault state here. If it's a no-fault state, my understanding is that, if you run into a Lexus, it doesn't matter. It's your insurance company that pays for it, not the other guys.
I wonder if they didn't have any.
Who's Nate? Well, I don't know. I'd have to look into it, but...
Oh, and you know what? That's wrong. It was their insurance. You know why?
Yeah.
Pedro Joint had filed or had gotten the insurance 28 days prior.
Yeah, there you go.
It was his insurance.
It was his insurance.
Yeah.
Right. So they just... Oh, my God.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Great.
So this is, it bothers me when, supervisors like the men and women on this case were relentless and they are undisputedly the best and of the best of what they do. The chief of detectives, said after they arrested him. And it's like, yeah, you know what happened? He got in trouble and got found because he was using, a credit card that belonged to Mrs. Caballero, going to different bodegas and used her credit card after she'd been murdered. So that's where he's arrested using her credit card. So yeah, the men and women of the NYPD, what? You know, you let him go. He lives in the building. He's done handiwork for, like, how many victims need to pile up before you realize that, you know, you got a serial killer on your hands? What was he going to do? Work his way through the building and kill everyone until he got as much money as he wanted? That bothers me. And you know, I am a big supporter of law enforcement. You know, I am. It just...
Yes, but as we pointed out on this podcast before, sometimes the cops mess up.
Well, we all do. We're all humans.
We're all humans.
I would love to know, and maybe I'm speaking too quickly, and maybe there'll be some wonderful explanation, but I can tell you that 2 of the families are filing lawsuits against the Housing Authority of New York and against the police for $25 million because they feel they should have done more to keep the elderly citizens safe. No recordings, not enough lighting, you know. So I don't know that they're gonna get $25 million, but I don't blame them. I'm not litigious, but I just feel like there shouldn't have been a second murder, and there really shouldn't have been a third. There just should not have been a third. And the mistakes along the way, and I really don't want to be pointing out mistakes from law enforcement, to find a woman on her kitchen floor and her ribs are broken and there's a stab wound in her neck, but you don't see it, but a funeral director does. To find a woman who's beaten and stomped, that's going to be pretty easy to figure out. She can't stomp on her own neck. I don't care how flexible she is. And then to find a woman choked with a cord. She wasn't, into autoerotic asphyxiation. It
right.
I just am.
Come on.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we'll probably be hearing more about Kevin Gavin. And I'm not sure that these are his only 3 victims. He's lived there a long time. And I'm not sure.
66. So, it sounds like, he was a greedy motherfucker.
Right.
But he also had a penchant for killing people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he liked doing that. And I think
right.
it sounds like he found joy in, finding an excuse in somebody owing him money to go and, kill people.
Right. And the thing that's interesting is that he doesn't have one MO. He, you can say these would be crimes of passion, but you ask for, it's not. Producer Mark is right. This is not a crime of passion. You go to someone and say you owe me money, and whether there's a dispute, no, I don't, I paid you, or however it's done, you push an old lady into a table and she gets stabbed. No, you stab her and then you push her down and her ribs break, or you punch her in the ribs. I don't know. You beat up a very thin, frail, beautiful woman and stomp on her throat 3 times. And then you strangle a 3rd woman with a cord. So he has many different MOs. And that's horrifying, because I just feel like there might be a lot more elderly women who he one day decided owed him money, or, whether it was in a drug-fueled, he's out of his gourd, or whether he's completely stone cold sober and decides someone owes him money and then he's going to, make them pay. I don't know. And I think we're going to hear more about Kevin Gavin, but the case we're talking about, I promise we're getting to it, is 78-year-old Louise Paciarello. And it's a real interesting one, and I am not at all saying that Kevin Gavin was involved. It's between 25 and 30 miles, depending on where we're talking about, from Yonkers, where Louise lived, and the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, where Kevin Gavin and the 3 victims lived. But a very bizarre thing happened in my mind. So Wednesday, August 22nd of 2007, Firefighters respond to the scene of a fire at a senior citizen apartment in Yonkers. So the fire is actually put out by 6:15, but Louise Paciarello's home apartment is completely gone, completely burned out. She is being taken out by EMTs, and she's semi-conscious, kind of going in and out of consciousness. And at first they thought that it was smoke inhalation, and they find out that that's not true. She ended up dying later at the hospital of her injuries from being strangled. Now, I did not know that you can die later from being strangled. The severity of your injury to the throat can later, end your life. It doesn't have to be immediate. It's not like how it's portrayed in movies and TV. If someone strangles you, you pass out first. Do you, die? Not always. Do people come back? Yes. Do they suffer injuries? Probably. It may be difficult to talk. It depends on the person and, again, the severity of the injury. But she was not dead when they took her out of her apartment, but she died shortly after. Now, there are some issues like the fact that there were 2 different places in the apartment that, a point of origin that the fire started, which makes it seem that it wasn't her. The first thought was she caught her clothing on fire in the kitchen and tried to put it out and it didn't work. And she walked to the bedroom and lay down on the bed and died, or, almost died. No, they figure out later. No, there's 2 points of origin that were intentionally set. This was no accident. Now, what comes into play a little later is that Louise had some issues leading up to her murder. The most bizarre was that written on a napkin one morning, a month before the fire is set, on her kitchen table is a note that said, "I'm here, it's 4 a.m., you're sleeping, I'll be back."
Do we know who left that?
No.
And how do we know it was there? She reported it?
Yep.
Gee, okay, whoa.
Now here's the other part. She reported it. Her sister-in-law lived in the building on a different floor. She had lived on the second floor, but in more current years had moved down to the first floor because it was just easier going up and down. But she was still very physically fit. There was an older gentleman in the building. She's 78. But she was still in good shape. But this 85, 86-year-old gentleman had trouble lifting things. And every time he would go to the store, he would leave his bags outside of the door, and Louise would come over and help him carry things in. So she was still physically fit, but she had moved down to the first floor. Her sister-in-law lived there, and the gentleman who she helped lived there. And she showed both of them the note written on a napkin. "I'm here at 4 a.m. You were sleeping. I'll be back." Now, what she said to both of these people was, "He's going to come back, and he knows I keep my money in the freezer."
But she didn't say who it was.
She does not. Now, there's lots of theories that it's some sort of younger family member. I don't know who. A nephew, maybe. A brother-in-law, I don't know. Her sister-in-law was widowed and lived in the building. She was never married, had no kids. She was a nurse's aide at St. John's. Every person that speaks of her says the same thing, which is really interesting. She was so beautiful. She's a 78-year-old woman, and the mailman said, "I cherished every interaction with Louise in the building. She was such a beautiful woman." They mean, outwardly and inward. She was beautiful inside and out. But here's the other thing. 2 weeks before the murder, she had had the handyman of the building rekey her lock.
Okay, so she was afraid of something.
She was. She had the locks changed, and yet someone got in August at 6 p.m. It's still daylight. It's summer. On the East Coast, 6 p.m. is not like 6 p.m. in California. It's bright. The sun doesn't go down till 9 or 10 in the summer. It's like the middle of the day. How did someone get in? Would it had to have been someone she knew?
Well, you'd think so.
Was it someone who held a grudge?
Oh, was it the handyman that rekeyed her apartment?
What would he have to gain?
Who knows?
Why would she ask the handyman to rekey the apartment if she thought it was him?
Well, maybe it wasn't who she thought it would be. I don't know.
Well, she
bizarre.
told everyone, right? She told everyone, he's coming back and he knows I keep my money in the fridge. She was,
well, well, of course, by doing that, she now has told a whole bunch of people
No. When I say everyone, I'm sorry. She told the handyman she needed her apartment rekeyed, which, by the way, after it was rekeyed, she called her elderly male neighbor and said at 2 a.m. someone was jiggling the door handle.
Okay. All right.
This is 2007. Why is there not, a security login, a key card? A camera. I mean, she apparently, she retired in 1996 and she had worked at St. John's Riverside Hospital for 25 years. She was a nurse's aide. And she's living in a building that, was a really nice area, nice part of town, and didn't have any sort of issues with robberies like that. She had this medical knowledge, and in her neighbors, time of need, when they're older, she would, give them some advice. Hey, you might want to get that checked out, or you know what? No, it's okay. Let's just do this. She actually, continued to be like a neighborly nurse to the elderly people where she lived. And here she was helping her, much older neighbor who couldn't lift his groceries. And she wasn't. I was like, did she have dementia? No. Like, was the jiggling of the lock, was that real? Well, apparently, yes.
Imagination? No.
Right.
Well,
right.
It could have been if she was really scared, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, somebody got in there.
That's right.
And obviously strangled her and set a fire.
Right. And it's so heartbreaking that she was still conscious when they removed her from this. She was badly burned, but she was still conscious. They said semi-conscious, so she was probably in and out of consciousness, and maybe she didn't have time or the energy to say a name, or maybe she didn't even know who it was. But I can tell you, there was no money found in the freezer. Her purse is gone. But there was money left in the apartment sitting out.
Oh. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder if this was a simple robbery. If you're there at 4 a.m. and there's an older woman sleeping and she doesn't know you're there, why do you leave a calling card? Is this a robbery or is it something else?
Did the note on the napkin survive at all? Has anybody been able to look at it and analyze the handwriting on it?
No. That is the problem. You can say she wrote it herself. I don't know that would be true because I believe her sister-in-law would have been able to say that looks like her writing. It was written on a napkin left on her kitchen table. That's why I'm like trying to go over everything in my head. Was she suffering from dementia? Was she paranoid? Did Did she come up with this? Was she looking for attention? Apparently, none of that is true. She showed the neighbor the note. She showed her sister-in-law the note. And then apparently she threw it away. But she told the superintendent of the building, please have the handyman put in new locks for me. And he did. And that was 1 month before the fire and her murder. 2 weeks after she had the new locks put in, someone was jiggling the handle at 2 a.m.
Or at least she said so.
Well, that's what she said. But she didn't strangle herself and set herself on fire.
No.
Somebody else did that. And you want to know a really, really shitty, scary theory? The older gentleman in the building that she helps, and I'm not saying his name because I literally cannot pronounce it. I'm going to call him Walter, but his last name is Astapczzyk. Astapak, maybe?
Don't ask me to try.
I know. Let's just call him Walter. So Walter said that I was worried about her. I know she was worried. And she said, he knows I keep my money in the freezer, but she wouldn't tell me who it was. This older gentleman, Walter, says, there's a young man who took her shopping sometimes. I'm like, oh no, it sounds like Kevin Gavin, but it's obviously not him, or hopefully not. I mean, she was so on top of it and so smart. The people in the building called her the lady cop because she was just, kept her eyes open, her head on a swivel. She was very, able to move. And the thing that's really so weird that Walter said was, I saw her standing there in the middle of the afternoon at the mailboxes. And then a few hours later, there's a fire and she's strangled. So Walter thinks, someone was in her apartment. She had come home from shopping, stopped at the mailboxes, which he said is kind of a place where everyone gathers and talks. It's like a common front hall, and then goes into her apartment. And then there's a fire a few hours later. And
so maybe he was waiting for her there.
Uh-huh.
And the police have done an investigation, I assume, and interviewed everybody they think is worth interviewing.
Oh, yeah. We have a number that you can call if you happen to know anything. It's really heartbreaking because the people at the grocery store that had seen her that day were like, oh my gosh, we had been waiting for her to come back. We didn't know what had happened. She is the most beautiful woman. That's the thing. This shopkeeper said, she's an icon of beauty. She's the simple, easygoing, beautiful woman. Literally, a 78-year-old woman is being talked about like that. It's just, And so they think it's this fire, that accidental fire that happened, that she died. And the medical examiner is the one who calls the family members and says, I just want you to know it was not the fire. She was strangled.
And then subsequently, I guess the fire marshal saw the two places where it looked like it had been set intentionally. 2 points
of origin.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you hear about people like Kevin Gavin who pray, they say we need to protect the youngest among us and the oldest. And I wasn't really sure I understood that until now. And I get it. I just never think of someone hurting people that are older. I don't, and younger. I get it. They're younger, and you feel that, you can take advantage of that, which, ironically will be an upcoming episode of a younger person that may have been taken advantage of, a very bizarre mystery that's still unsolved. But this is an unsolved homicide. Louise didn't go missing. She didn't walk away from her life. She spent her life in service to others and was just known because she was generous. So who would take advantage of that? Who would do something like that? Who would, terrorize her? If the note and the shaking of the doorknob are, true, which I'm really leaning toward the fact that they are, who would terrorize her? If you're someone who knows that she keeps money in the house and in the freezer particularly, why wouldn't you just come in and take it? And you come in at 4 a.m. when she's asleep, but you need to leave her a note. And at some point on, a beautiful August Wednesday in 2007 in the afternoon or early evening, you get entry into her home somehow. Maybe she knows you, or maybe you've already been in there, even with new locks, and you strangle her and you set fire to her apartment to cover what you've done, and her purse is gone. And maybe the money in the freezer is gone, or maybe she took the money out of the freezer because she was afraid you were coming back. But there's other money left in the apartment sitting out. That's why I don't know if this is a grudge, like a personal grudge against this poor woman. Could it really just be?
Yeah, it sounds like it could be grudge. It could be just that his intent was never money.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. The woman who, this resident who can't lift more than 10 pounds because of his heart condition, if he needed help, she would run to help him. And he said, she told me, I can help you anytime. Please let me know if you can't lift something. I can help you anytime. And now that man said, I'm worried they're going to come back sooner or later. I mean, he's worried that he'll be taken advantage of. I mean, I can't, this is one of those mysteries that, again, I have found nothing that says that she was suffering any sort of cognitive, dissonance or dementia. She was pretty much on top of it. 78, there's 78-year-olds who struggle, and there's 78-year-olds who could kick my ass. And she seemed like a pretty on top of it woman. This is one of those ones I don't get. Someone who spends their life, in service to others, had other people apparently help her get to the grocery store, but then was healthy enough to help other people carry in their groceries. Could it be someone who had, quote unquote, offered to help her? A Kevin Gavin type person? And it wouldn't be that she owed them money because she was apparently really good at, paying people back for things and known in the entire building for her generosity. She would, do things for people, not just monetary, but her time and her energy. So who did this to Louise Paciarello? If you know anything about this case in Yonkers, New York, in August of 2007, please call the Cold Case Unit at 914-377-7731 and more cowbell.
If you'd like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/just the Tip-Sters.